Welcome to the Resilience Report, where we go beyond the headlines to spotlight the trailblazers redefining sustainable business. I'm your host, Lauren Scott. In each episode, I sit down with ecopreneurs and lighthouse leaders, visionaries, who are tackling our planet's toughest challenges and proving that business can be a force for good. Thanks for joining me as we explore what's possible and what's next on the path to a more resilient future. Today's episode takes resilience somewhere we all live every single day, our homes. For nearly 20 years, today's guest has been quietly and sometimes uncomfortably challenging one of the biggest assumptions we make, that a new home is automatically a healthy one. Spoiler alert, it's often not. Paul Kealey is the founder and president of EkoBuilt, one of North America's most advanced sustainable home building companies, and the architect of a philosophy he calls house is medicine. His work sits at the intersection of human health, environmental responsibility, and long-term affordability, and it's forcing the building industry to rethink everything from air quality to energy use to how homes actually affect our bodies and minds. Paul designs and builds net zero passive houses that don't just save energy, they reduce stress, prevent mold and illness, protect families, and last for generations. His belief is simple but radical. Our homes are not inert structures, they're living environments. And when they're designed poorly, they quietly compromise our health every single day. In this conversation, we dig into why building codes aren't enough, how value engineering often works against human health, what the pandemic changed about how we think about indoor air, and why resilience at both the personal and planetary level starts at home. So if you care about health, sustainability, affordability, or the future of housing, this episode will completely change the way you look at the place you live. Welcome back to another episode of the Resilience Report. We always love it when there's a different angle to our episodes, especially when they build on previous episodes where our listeners have really reached out and expressed that they love the topics. One of the areas that we've seen a lot of interest has been around the built space. And to date, we've mostly had guests coming in from the commercial real estate side. So today we have someone who is going to be able to bring a fresh lens when it comes to the social and environmental impact of residential buildings. So with that, I would love to welcome Paul to the show.
Thanks very much. Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here, of course, and contribute to this conversation.
I'd love to start right up at the top in terms of this idea of the built space, and especially as it comes to the human health impact, which I think, again, is such a fresh angle for us to look at. Do you think that there are any misconceptions or maybe gaps that the average person has when it comes to looking at the built space and specifically residential? And if you could share a little bit about how you got to that, really challenging the status quo.
Yeah, I think the biggest misconception in the home building industry, in the home building world, is the belief that a new home automatically equals a healthy home. People, I think it's common where a lot of people feel they're just in an unhealthy environment. And in reality, we spend approximately 90% of our time indoors, especially in those climate zones away from the equator. And moving into a new home isn't necessarily a healthy home. Sometimes if a home passes building code, looks clean, uses modern materials, then we assume it's also good for human health. But a home, is important to understand. It's not an inert environment. It's a living biological environment that shapes our respiratory, cognitive, thermal qualities of the people living inside of it. And a code-built home, can trap a lot of moisture if it's not built right. It can accumulate ridiculous amounts of carbon dioxide or toxins in the home. It can fluctuate very widely in temperature. And toxins in the indoor air is really natural in most code-built homes. So it's very important that people understand the true biological nature of a home and what it should be. A home can really be an optimal, healthy environment, or it can be an optimal, unhealthy environment. There's a lot of symptoms that people might feel are just normal, maybe just attached to their own physiological being, meaning morning congestion, sinus irritation, brain fog, just general slugginess, dryness in the wintertime, humidity discomfort in the summertime, sleep disruption, and respiratory irritation is a big one too that really stems from drafts and cold surfaces. So important for people to understand that a building code house or a standard home is not a type of home that's protecting your health. And really a big reason why our company has chosen to focus on really trying to educate and make people aware of all these health implications that could be connected to the house, not necessarily someone's physiology.
And beyond the human health concept, you're also thinking more broadly to planetary health. So you're focused on net zero buildings or passive homes, where you're looking at, yes, this energy efficient and more environmental side, but also buildings that are more affordable, more resilient, which really challenges, unfortunately, the average home. So what does that look like from a business model perspective? How are you able to kind of create a business that is able to thrive in that when it really goes against the grain right now?
A business that is able to ultimately thrive in a high performance perspective is really one that every company is going to have their own reasons. I know for us, focusing on affordability is a really big part. When you build any kind of high performance home, low energy home, or healthy home, and ironically, the more energy efficient a house is made, also the more healthy home it becomes. We used to focus predominantly on energy efficiency, but when we shifted our main communication, and this is really connected with our values as a company, meaning a home that is is resulting in an optimally healthy environment, it naturally also allows us to create the most energy efficient home. But we really, in terms of affordability, it comes down to two main components. And one is a minimalistic approach to design. So a type of house that really minimizes the amount of material and labor that go into the home. Now, it's also important that a healthy home is built stronger, built to withstand these changing weather patterns. Really, a house that is able to be stronger under any weather condition is a big part. So, compromising the strength of a home is not part of it. We want to make the home stronger, but you can do that with advanced construction techniques. A minimalistic approach to design is really a house that results in minimum labor, minimum materials, and when you have a house that is minimized in terms of those two components, you naturally will have the most affordable home as well, because the cost of the house is the house in general is a combination of a lot of different systems. And when you minimize the cost associated with those systems, it's always going to come down to labor and materials. So that's really the biggest one. And the second one, though, for us, strategic partnerships, a system that really puts in place partnerships with material providers, logistics coordination, so transportation of the materials. We do supply our company a passive house package that's shipped right across North America. So really solving the logistic component is a big part. And when you simplify, I think, building models in general, and when you increase volume, a lot of complexities also reduce. And partnering with companies that are able to ship across North America, partner with companies that are able to supply better costs for materials with increased volume is a big part of our business model. We need to make sure we have a certain amount of volume to offer the best cost, and offering the best cost comes with a lot of strategic partnerships. Also, engineering. Houses have different engineering demands. Uh, depending on where the home is built in the United States or in Canada, which are our two main markets. We're talking about climate zones that might have impacts for seismic reasons or high wind conditions, meaning hurricane or tornado zones. So really focusing on those two parts, a minimalistic approach to design and strategic partnerships has enabled us to ultimately provide the most high performance, healthy home and reduce a lot of costs that would otherwise be connected with a more expensive building.
And when it comes to making these purchases, I mean, it's often one of the biggest purchases in our lives are our homes. And we often want to look for the ROI on any kind of investment. So it sounds like you're able to drive a lot of the costs down through those strategic partnerships by really simplifying the process. How do you typically communicate the ROI of investing in the type of house that you do have with EkoBuilt? Is it showcasing how it pays for itself over a number of couple of years, or what does that ROI modeling look like for your client base?
Well, we feel that the cost of a high performance home should not affect anyone's cost of living. Now, when we think of, I guess, why in general are you going to want to build a more high performance home? And most people think of the energy usage of the home, the energy efficiency of the home. And like I said before, the healthier you make a home, the more energy efficient it is. And this is really one of the biggest misunderstood concepts in the building world. And in a house that is built to a more high performance standard, as long as the cost is limited to the point where the savings in energy are the equivalent or equal that incremental cost to build per se, you're going to have a house that doesn't really involve any increase expense or out of pocket expense from a cost of living perspective. So we found that if we can limit the cost of a high performance home to 10%, it is true that more expensive building materials, even with the best supply chains at the best cost in the world, it is a house that naturally costs more because in general, there are some more materials that are involved in the home. And when you look at the building envelope of the home and compare it to a code built home, but if you build that house to a certain performance standard where it reduces the operational cost of the home and it reduces the expenses, those out of pocket monthly expenses, whether it's a gas bill or a propane bill, if those savings can offset the incremental cost, then the cost of living doesn't change. And we feel that that is really where it has to stop and start. If we're providing a type of home that is going to be significantly more cost intensive, most people aren't going to be able to afford it. And if no one can afford this house, then it's not going to be built. As simple as that. Or the only way it would be built is if the building codes change themselves. But as we've seen in the home building world, in the building code world, codes are very slow to change. And codes do need to change in order to really protect people's investment in a home. It's much better to invest a little bit more in a house that's going to be better for your future investment, meaning one that removes any future possibility of going through a major intensive energy retrofit. Ultimately, doesn't matter how a house is operated, whether it's an electrically only operated home or a combination of electric and gas. Energy is increasing, operational costs increasing. An affordable home is not the house that you can build for the cheapest dollar value, because that same house is gonna also come with a massive operational cost, which is just going to increase into the future. So we really do take the perspective of building a more high performance home in a way where the savings in energy are going to offset that incremental cost is going to now be a house that anyone with a reasonable budget to build can afford to build.
And it's so interesting too, because I've been in the commercial space for real estate since about 2012. And between 2012 and 2020, most people didn't really understand what I did. They understood maybe the energy side. They maybe understood the implications with heating or air conditioning, ventilation, but they never really asked about the human health side until 2020. And then all of a sudden, there was at least a general awareness and understanding of indoor air quality, the fact that we're always inside. Did that moment in time change at all the way that you and your company speak about the built space being medicine for the human occupant? And do you feel like we've maybe gone back since 2020? Do you feel like over the past 5 years, maybe there was heightened interest in 2020 and now people are starting to care a little bit less?
Well, I think the pandemic was a big moment for people really to understand the true impact that a house can have on our health. And the pandemic didn't just elevate indoor air quality, this recognition that it's a big deal. It really forced the world to confront a truth that building scientists have known for decades, that your home is a biological environment that directly affects a lot of things related to health, your respiratory system, your cognitive function, your immune system, your stress levels. I think before 2020, conversations around all of these health impacts that a building has were niche, they were technical. After 2020, all of these issues really became mainstream. People suddenly understood that air could be healthy or unhealthy, protective or harmful, and that buildings had a direct influence on well-being. After the pandemic, people had lived inside buildings for months at a time. And really, I think, started to feel these biological impacts or consequences that weren't necessarily there before. And I think 5 years ago, people asked, is air quality really that important, or before 5 years ago? And today, those questions are, how do I improve it? So the understanding that a house is a big deal. When I think about a house from a longevity perspective, when we think of the basic necessities of life, food, water, shelter, there's been a lot of talk, a lot of conversation about healthy food, healthy water. And I think, it's very simple for people to do their research and find out how to eat healthy, drink healthy. And that's been a common conversation happening for a long period of time. But the one missing ingredient is the house. Building codes are not designed to protect our health. And when we think about how much we breathe every day and how much we're inside interior environments every day, it's the one single biggest thing that's affecting our livelihood, affecting our longevity. We're living a lot longer than we did 50 or 100 years ago. But a house really is an environment that can optimize your health or take away from it. And it really starts and stops with the indoor air quality. It's the single biggest reason why you build a high performance home. But indoor air quality isn't just about managing the interior air. It's not just about putting in a particular filter in a fresh air machine. It's about building the home in a way where there's no toxins or very limited toxins that are going to come in through the building envelope of the home. And most homes are built in a way where an overload of toxins really come in through the building envelope, whether it's through a leaky building. And, buildings in general are in a constant state of negative depressurization. And I'm referring to standard code homes, of course, that are filled with exhaust vents being in either washrooms, kitchen spaces, even the clothes dryer. Houses that are focused on exhausting, but not focused on bringing in fresh air. And a house that's in a constant state of exhaust is in a constant state of depressurization. Houses are in depressurization, really bringing in a lot of outside air at the same time. And if that outside air is not in a optimally healthy condition, it's going to affect the indoor air quality instantly. But further to that, the building envelope of the home, there's a lot of manufactured materials in any house, whether it's a high performance passive house or a code built home. There's a lot of glues, there's a lot of fibers in any kind of insulation that you do not want mixing with your indoor air. So I think really the pandemic, it highlighted all of these impacts, and really is a big reason that us as a company realize that we need to be focusing on the health, because this is one of the biggest mistakes of the home building conversation, or the high performance home building conversation. I don't think the world needs another builder talking about energy efficiency, talking about building science. Those conversations are there, but what's limited in the conversation is health. You can build a high performance home that is very unhealthy, but it's very simple with the construction models that we have available to us now to guarantee that a home is also built in a healthy way.
Much in the same way, I think, from the pandemic, as you were mentioning, where we saw interest and awareness all of a sudden, I also do feel like to get to that human health side, sometimes it takes individual exposure to understand. I can speak for myself that had my own health journey, and in the end, it required doing some mold testing at my house, at my home, and because of the pandemic, all of a sudden was spending way more time at home and had that exposure. So it seems like it might be an easy thing to convince once you have that individual experience. But when you're going to these conversations and maybe trying to convince somebody who hasn't had that personal experience, are you able to bring them along on the journey of understanding it without necessarily having lived through it, much like they have for the pandemic and indoor air quality, but really the deeper dive into the house being medicine?
When people sometimes think of, is it really a house? Is it really that important? A home has windows. If don't feel right in the house, I'll just open my windows. And that is true. A house can always maintain a lot of fresh air, even in the wintertime, opening those windows. But opening the windows would assume that the air quality outside is optimal. And really, the air quality outside is only optimal maybe 10% of the time. And there might be some very rare, climate zones or locations in the world where air quality is ideal most of the year. But so when you think about that, it really should cause someone to truly understand that you need to have a way of maintaining an indoor air environment, not just relying on outside air. Sometimes there's a lot of skepticism though, and really the healthy home communication does create a lot of anxiety. People thinking, and maybe after this conversation, am I in a home that is sacrificing my health? And I'm not going to recommend one particular way to test your air inside the house. There's indoor air quality specialists in every city. It's important to reach out and test your indoor air, because if you're feeling anything that's not right inside your home, if you leave the home and you really pay attention to the way you feel inside the home, feel outside of the home, it should raise some understandings that whether your home is possibly impacting your health or not. But I think in general, everyone has felt some basic symptoms, felt morning congestion, fatigue in certain rooms, poor sleep in stuffy bedrooms. Everyone in general, and in most standard homes, has also experienced drafts that irritate breathing, or humidity levels that may make the air feel heavy. Symptoms are most of the time universal. They're the gateway to understanding. And once you understand these symptoms, these are symptoms that an average human should not be feeling in their home. The home should be a place of a stress-free environment. I like to refer to the inside air as a place with a highly oxygenated environment. But you can't have a highly oxygenated environment unless the home is first built airtight to keep all those outside toxins or potential toxins outside the home in a stable environment that you can control. You want all of the air to be controlled through a fresh air machine. And that could either be an ERV or an HRV. Fresh air machine, it really depends on your climate zone, and you have to talk to HVAC professionals regarding that. Talking to your builders, asking them these questions is a big part of figuring out what type of house to build. And one of those questions you want to ask, anyone should be asking their builder, is how is the air maintained inside the home? And air should always be maintained through a dedicated fresh air system, not a fresh air system that's connected to a furnace or connected to an air handler, but a fresh air system that's going to exhaust air from all the humid areas of the home, and a fresh air system that's going to bring in fresh air to all the living spaces, not just the living room, the dining room, but the bedroom spaces as well. Anyone in a home should have the ability to be in charge of their indoor air quality. And any good fresh air machine is also going to have a way for you to monitor humidity in the home. Humidity should be between 40% to 60%. Do not have any impact on health, and not be too dry or too humid, which both cause big problems in a home. A fresh air machine should tell you the parts per million of carbon dioxide in the home. Somewhere around the 500 to 750 parts per million carbon dioxide is also a characteristic of optimal indoor air quality. It's known that bedrooms will be somewhere between 1,000 parts per million or 1,500 parts per million at nighttime while you're sleeping. And if this is the case in a bedroom, when you think of where we sleep, is almost 30% of our lives. We're sleeping in our bedrooms. So it's very important that, of course, we have optimal indoor air quality in there.
Do you think that those changes are coming primarily from, and changes for the better, are coming primarily from that grassroots initiative of the occupants saying, I want something better? Or do you feel like there's maybe a broader movement, such as regulatory changes, that are really required to see this movement take off?
Well, I think regulatory requirements are the most important, of course. Building codes need to change from more prescriptive based codes to more performance based codes. Really, building codes that dictate how the home should operate. But a performance based code can only be most important if testing is a requirement. And with respect to testing, what's interesting, most building codes across North America, the international code, even throughout most of Europe, is requiring houses to operate at a certain level of efficiency. And I just know I'm mostly familiar with the North American codes that stipulate any house shouldn't experience more than 3 air changes per hour. And that is the code. You have to build your house to operate with this certain degree of efficiency. Most people, sometimes people think that the efficiency level of a home is related to its insulation levels, but the single biggest factor regarding efficiency of a home is the air tightness of a home. But if building a code built house, any home isn't required to be tested. And this is one of the main biggest problem, I think, with the code. As a part to changing to more of a healthy performance-based code, testing, really needs to be there. And if a house isn't tested, even if it's designed right on paper, if it's not tested, it's not going to perform. So really requiring builders to to test houses and to design houses in a way where they need to meet basic performance requirements. And those performance requirements should involve a certain amount of insulation where the home is going to conserve energy rather than leak it. And that's coupled with air tightness, of course. But the biggest one is probably vapor open building assemblies. And like Lauren, you mentioned mold before, and this is really the silent killer in most houses. Any house that isn't built with a proper vapor open system is ultimately going to be a building envelope that is trapping moisture. And any building envelope that's trapping moisture and isn't built with a certain degree of air tightness is one that's going to automatically guarantee moist, humid, damp environments inside a wall, roof cavities. And those damp environments are going to lead to mold. It's the silent killer because it's in the building envelope. You can't see it. And if you can't see it, doesn't mean there's not a problem. That mold, those mold spores are coming into the home. They're really mixing with the indoor air environment. And most filters, even the MERV filters, we recommend that a fresh air machine really should have a minimum MERV 13 filter. And, the filtration is a conversation on its own. But even the MERV 13 to 16 filters, they only remove a certain amount of particulates, fine particulates. And so if mold is in the walls, it's in the air, even with a fresh air machine that has a good filter, isn't going to protect the indoor air quality and protect your health if there's any mold in the walls.
I'm wondering if it's the same in residential or homes as it is in commercial, where you kind of start with this grand idea of this building is going to be energy efficient. It's going to focus on occupant experience and well-being. And then as time goes on, things get value engineered out. Certainly understand that it's balancing everything. Is that the same kind of balance that you need to figure out when it comes to homes? Or do you feel like maybe there's a little bit less of a drive to constantly push costs down and you're able to more strive what is actually best for the occupant?
Yeah, from a value perspective, what's best for the occupant needs to be a system based around health. So there's some fundamentals that every house should have. And that's air tightness. And when we say air tightness, there's no way to make a house 100% airtight. There's always even at a passive house level, which is the world's most energy efficient construction model. A passive home still allows 0.6 air changes per hour. But at that tight environment, okay, so even if a house is built with a high degree of air tightness, it has to have a way to dissipate that moisture. And that's done through what we call a vapor open building system. Any house built in any climate zone should be vapor open. The vapor open membrane could either be on the outside of the home or the inside of the home. That depends on the climate zone. So a way to allow moisture to get out through the construction materials and any residual moisture that is in the home. Next, a house has to have fresh air. It needs a fresh air system. Ventilation done through a filtered machine rather than through open windows, because as we mentioned before, outdoor air quality isn't optimal most of the year. Those windows are there for a backup and for fresh air to be brought in the home whenever it is optimal. But in order for a fresh air machine to contribute in a high performance home or keep it healthy, a certain level of filtration. I mentioned before the MERV 13 filter is that minimum filter, but a machine that has a high heat recovery associated with it. Now, it is important to mention, most building codes are now requiring fresh air machines to be integrated into the building envelope. The problem with the standard fresh air machine is they're not efficient enough. Most of them will frost during winter conditions. And when they frost, all they're doing is recirculating stale air. Or homeowners really disconnect them a lot of the time if they're creating any noise from those winter conditions. But a lot of high performance ERVs are also on the market that are able to have a 75 to 90% efficiency level when it comes to the fresh air. So that means even at freezing cold winter temperatures, machines that can extract 75 to 90% of the heat energy from the stale air that's leaving the home and transfer that to the incoming cold air. So the fresh air vents that are coming into the living spaces, whether it's the bedrooms or the living space, that air that's coming in is at a comfortable temperature. Even at minus 15 degrees Celsius, real cold exterior conditions, these high performance fresh air machines are delivering 18-degree air to the inside. So it really helps maintain a comfortable environment. But a big part of a comfortable environment is a house that's protected against any thermal bridges. And this is really the last point of a real high performance, comfortable building. Eliminating the thermal bridges, very important. Most homes are built with an outside wall system or roof system that's both connected to the inside finish and the outside finish. And if that's the case, the wall or the roof has a thermal bridge, basically a pathway for heat leaving the home in the wintertime or a pathway for heat coming into the home in the summertime. And if a house has a lot of these thermal bridges, houses really that create a lot of thermal instability and create a lot of anxiety connected with the human body. So building in a way that eliminates these thermal bridges is a really big part of a healthy home. You want to ask your builder, anyone that's listening there, you want to make sure you ask your builder how they control and manage thermal bridges.
This is such a helpful checklist. And certainly, I think for anyone who's thinking of building their own homes, they can take this episode and really just bring it directly with their builders. If we do have other folks, such as myself, who owns a post-World War II home, who definitely leaks everywhere in terms of the temperature in the winter and the summer, are there first steps that you would recommend for our listeners to really think about what could they do as a first, maybe one or two steps to make their homes healthier for them and their families, more in the kind of that retrofit perspective?
So retrofitting, very similar to the principles with respect to new construction. Now, sometimes retrofits are costly depending on the house, but really adding a certain amount of thermal envelope, air tightness, vapor open. Very important that the envelope is open. But Lauren, like interesting though, with respect to houses, when you're saying the house, the older homes, very leaky. I think some of your experience, what's interesting is a lot of older houses don't necessarily have unhealthy air quality. Usually the air quality is very healthy. And the reason for that is there's a lot of air leakage. A lot of air leakage. Where there's a lot of air leakage, there's a lot of energy. Where there's a lot of energy in terms of air movement, it's going to keep mold out of the building envelope most of the time. But at the same time, depending on the home, is how that home is being heated and cooled, it's a very intensive energy loss of a house as well, right? So potentially very expensive to operate. So retrofits are becoming more and more common. Ultimately, any existing house or house that's more than 5 years old is going to have to go through a major energy retrofit at some point in time. And wherever it's easiest to have that done, either add to the exterior wall system on the inside of the home or the outside of the home, will depend on the construction of the house. But I think what's important for people to understand is that it is possible. Okay. But really making the house airtight should be that one single biggest component that you focus on. Next, add insulation where it's appropriate, inside or outside of the home. And most importantly, vapor open. Make sure the builder that is taking care of that retrofit for you is familiar with building science, in the sense that a vapor open system needs to be part of that thermal airtight membrane to really protect the house into the future, because retrofits cost money, a lot of money. And if you're going to retrofit, you want to just make sure that's done right the first time.
Did you have a specific moment in time where you really realized that there's this beautiful opportunity to have a positive impact on human environmental health through our homes? Was it a moment in time, or was it kind of a gradual progress over your own career?
Yes, it was mostly one single moment, and it's when I actually started the business and became self-employed. Now this is going back 25 years ago, where I started my professional career as a teacher. And this is really when I had the switch, when I had that aha moment, when I was going out to look for a house to buy. And I went into older homes, new homes, and similar to what I was saying before about the older home, I felt when I walked into any existing house, I felt it was very drafty, whereas the new houses just really felt like there was a lot of toxins in the home. Indoor air quality was very, very unhealthy. So I really felt there at this point in time there was a lot of opportunity to create a healthy home business. So it led me on a bit of a journey, personal journey, to figure out what that house was. I started with a log home, timber frame, really felt a house that minimized manufactured materials was the most healthy. But as things progressed, the energy efficiency of the home really had a big impact. Because if you can't build a healthy home affordably, there's really no point in doing it, because there's no one can afford it. And, this is the one, I think, single biggest thing that's missing from the sustainability conversation. If you can't build a house to be affordable, it's not sustainable, really. People have to be able to afford it in order to build more high performance homes. So really looking at all of the different construction models, because it's most beneficial to follow a construction model with proven results. And therefore, you can guarantee a home is going to act a certain way. For me, for our company, it's always been about creating that best sustainable home, the most healthy house, but also the most energy efficient home, to really offset the costs, the extra costs for building a more expensive, healthy house. And looking at all the different construction models, when I stumbled across the passive house construction model, it's really where that landed, or the business model I felt was really at a level of perfection per se. Construction is not a perfect science, but passive house really is a perfect construction model. And I say that really for one reason and one reason only. It's the only construction model in the world that guarantees a mold proof environment. In order to build a certified passive house system, it has to be a system that is what's called hygrothermically protected. Hygrothermically protected. What does that mean? Ultimately, that means a house that's protected against moisture, a house that has zero chance of moisture accumulating, regardless of where it's built in the world, whether it's built in a northern, cold, heating predominant climate, or a more southern tropical climate that is focused on air conditioning and keeping all of that humidity outside.
You mentioned starting this journey 25 years ago. I can only imagine. I mean, I've only been in the space for 12 years or so, and I've seen ebbs and flows of interest from the energy efficiency side to the human health side. How do you maintain this passion and enthusiasm? Is it really just the topic itself, or do you have other tools in your toolbox that allow you to keep on coming back to the work in the way that you do?
Well, I think really it's like there's motivation involved. Obviously, it's a principle, purpose over profit. Let's say now any business has to profit. We have to profit as a company to be able to do more. But ultimately, the motivation, I think, really requires a philosophy. The first thing that really grounds me is responsibility. Homes that shape or have the ability to shape human health. When you think about it, homes that can shape children's lungs, one of the biggest causes of asthma is children when the lungs are developing, being in unhealthy indoor air quality environments. But responsibility really building a house that can result in people's stress levels dropping, sleep quality improving, immune system stabilizing, and just overall long-term well-being. In the home building world, like I've touched on a number of times, a type of house that is naturally a unhealthy home if you just simply follow the building code. And when you become educated about the health implications that a home has, like we were discussing, where in general, the general population really became familiar with this during the pandemic. Responsibility in the home building world has really never become more important for builders, and really one of those points that drives me individually. Second, though, I think would be long-term thinking. Construction in general is notorious for short-term decision making, cheapest first cost, quickest installation, the easiest inspection. And it really is sad when you think about the construction world being dominated by short-term thinking. Builders that want to get in, get out, make their money, and I don't want to harp on these problems in the construction industry because there's a lot of good builders out there, but most good builders that focus on a high quality product aren't necessarily well versed in building science. And we need those builders that really want to create a great product and care about their customers to also understand the health impact that a house can have and they can have on their business. Building codes, I think, are going to evolve eventually, and builders are going to have a lot of performance-based systems to pull from in the very near future. But long-term thinking needs to be there. We need to be thinking about building a house that's not going to last for one generation, but multiple generations. So long-term thinking is really I think that biggest part that builders need to really become one with alone.
Perhaps it's in the passive house area, or maybe it's in this long-term thinking, but do you have any mentors or thought leaders that you turn to when it comes to continuing to grow and develop in this area?
Anyone that is in this world and puts responsibility over profit is most important. And when I think about some people, to highlight some people in general, Matt Damon, Leonardo DiCaprio are some people that have become very famous, have made a lot of money, but have also put that money that they have made to good causes. And really, I think looking up to people that are contributing to the world, using how successful they've been in the world, and using that income that to contribute to the world and make the world a better place is very inspirational. Also, I think of the military. Really, the military is very inspirational to me. We've built for a number of customers in the military, and just really being around their personality. People that are putting service over everything else and sacrificing ultimately their lives to create a world that is better and better for the present generation, and can it guarantee a better world for future generations is very inspirational as well.
To continue with that thread of the future generation, are there any guiding principles that you're hoping to pass on, maybe to the next generation coming in, whether it's in the built space or beyond?
Yes, the biggest mantra I think that should be there is design with intention. It's intentional living is a big part of a lot of conversations, but from a building perspective, design with intention and then execute with precision. We're in a housing emergency. all across the world too. We need housing. Housing really slowed down from the pandemic, putting us into a situation where we simply don't have enough houses. And it's scary to think that we are so short of housing, and the possibility that we might actually lose focus and just really move forward with the idea that we have to build quick, and that quality is secondary, health is secondary. At the same time, we also have a lot of opportunity to make the greatest impact with all these new houses that will be built into the near future and the distant future, designing with intention to create a house that will last for generations and be protected against future retrofits, protect our investment. When you think about the cost of a house in general now, one of the sad things that the pandemic did is it increased the general cost of construction. Now, people's cost of living has increased. Cost won't come down, but in general, cost of mortgage is taking up more of disposable income that people had in the past. So even more the reason to build with intention, to build a house that's not going to require those renovations that we've become used to in most existing houses.
Thank you so much. This has been such a great conversation. I'm sure our listeners are going to want to learn more about EkoBuilt. Could you point them in the right direction to go kind of dig in?
Yes, for sure. EkoBuilt.com/podcast is the best place to go. It's our website page dedicated to the podcast, where we have a lot of information out there for the listeners. We have a list of builder questions that you can take to ask your builder to make sure you're really going to build a home that's going to protect your health, protect your investment. Also on our EkoBuilt.com/podcast page, we have access to a lot of designs and costs to build according to those designs, over 80 different designs ranging from 400 square feet right up to 6,000 square feet multifamily concepts on this website page as well. So you have access to builder questions, access to designs when you're thinking about that vision for your next house, but also a cash incentive for anyone that's ready to jump into the design process, designing that home, whether it's 1, 2, 3 years down the road. We're going to offer you a cash incentive to proceed with that discount simply by listening to this podcast.
Thank you so much. And I do want to end with the same question we ask every guest, which is, what do you think it will take for businesses and leaders to be resilient going forward?
I think in order for businesses and leaders to be resilient going forward, it's going to have less to do with toughness and more to do with alignment. Alignment with human health, long-term thinking, genuine contribution. Longevity has never been a bigger part of the overall wellness, well-being conversation. And houses have great opportunity to contribute to the longevity movement. So really, by aligning with intentional living, intentional building is going to be that one single biggest value that builders, people building your own house, anyone building your own house is considered a builder. You're the builder. So really go forward with that alignment with human health, and you're going to create a house you're going to love coming back to every day, and it's going to optimize your well-being at the same time.
Thank you so much, Paul. This has been such a great conversation. I know I have some actions to take for my own home, and hopefully our listeners do too.
Thanks very much, Lauren. It was great being on your show.
I hope that you've enjoyed this week's edition of the Resilience Report. If you would like to hear and see more, be sure to check out @The Resilience Report on YouTube, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Until we connect again, remember, even on the darkest of days, we all have the opportunity to be a lighthouse for others as we collectively pursue better, more resilient business.